All right. So, welcome to the front row.
Come on, Betty. My laughing friend, she'll come up here.
Where's that front row?
I'm cutting up.
There's a camera right there. All right.
That's right, Betty.
All right.
So you're taking it to
Yes, we record this for. Did you ask that, Larry?
I did.
Oh yes, we are recording this class for some choir members asked me, and then some other folks have been watching it, and so.
And you're selling the CDs?
No, I am not. I am not selling any.
It's a fundraiser for
No,
Neil.
no one would pay for this.
You got t-shirts?
Now that's an idea. No.
Everybody will buy it.
Yeah. So, all right. So this class is called Fundamentally Drained. If you've never been here before, the idea came from. It's an old idea. I'm on a podcast. I'm on a podcast called Fundamentally Drained. If you are ever super bored and you want a lot of boring content to listen to, where it's me, another Episcopal priest named Everett Lees, a youth minister named Justin. We all grew up fundamentalists and became Episcopalian. So we're talking about it's a kind of a podcast for recovering fundamentalists and making that transition out of having all the answers and being told exactly what to believe your whole life, and then having enough questions or problems where that's not working for you anymore, so you have to figure things out. Anyway, so but then we taught this class. I had the idea for this class because this new book came out called The Great Dechurching, and it was based on a huge study that came out of the census and of some other data. It's the biggest study survey of church attendance ever done, and it showed that in the last 25 years, 40 million people who formerly went to church have stopped going to church. And so it's the greatest change in church history, in American history, greatest change in church attendance in American history, and it struck me because I should have been one of those statistics. I became I thought I was a non-believing, or at best agnostic, former believer who was getting ready to walk away from church and just trying to find a job, And then I slowly found my way kind of back to faith, and then eventually my church said, hey, you need to go to seminary. So, because God's grace, the Episcopal Church, whatever, I don't know. That's not the point of this. The point is I related to it because I was almost one of those statistics. And a lot of people I knew were almost one of those statistics. And a lot of you in this room were those statistics. And the same reasons a lot of you have told me of why you walked away from church for a while are in this book. So we talked about that the first week, and then every week we're just talking about a different reason why people left. And so tonight is the hardest one to do justice to, okay? Everyone repeat after me. Tom said, this one is the hardest one to get right or do any justice to. Okay, so that is my disclaimer. And that's my disclaimer. I'm probably going to mess this up big time. And I might offend somebody who's had some pain and suffering in their life and struggled to believe. But I think that's a big reason why people walk away from church. Pain and suffering, and not just pain and suffering, but how the church responds to it, which we're really bad at responding to it well. Even the best of us, with the most training, and I'm not saying that's me, but just even those of us who are really good at it aren't that great at it. Right? Because it's just hard. It's just hard. So that's what we're talking about tonight. So, fundamentally drained because of pain and suffering. I want to say this first. Every human experiences pain, suffering, and death. Did you guys know that? It's true. And I know you're thinking, what? Shocking. But no one told me that. I maybe they were trying to shield me from that. And I knew, yeah, everybody dies. But when you're young, you don't think that applies to you, right?
Right.
And I heard, the message I got was that pain and suffering come from evil or the devil. At least that's the message I heard. And that as long as I do the right things, trust God, have enough faith, I'll avoid most of the pain and suffering in the world. That is the message. Yes.
It's funny, isn't it?
It is funny.
It's absurd. Yeah.
That is the message I got.
Like, no.
In hindsight, it seems ridiculous. But I was a grad student in my early 20s, married, before I really started dealing with some of these things. And that's crazy. It's really crazy. But I grew up not knowing it in kind of a church that was kind of a less serious version of the health and wealth gospel, right? A kinder, gentler version of that that's not about TV preaching and raising millions of dollars, but a little bit. Every Sunday I heard, rejoice in the Lord always, right? This is the day. And we'd all say it. The Lord has made. I will rejoice. And if you weren't happy, there was something wrong. Right? You're sinning. Because the joy of the Lord is my strength, right? And yes. And that stuff really kind of does help you sometimes. And it encourages me sometimes to think about that stuff. But also, it's a little crazy. Because that is not how life works. You have to be free to be sad at church. I want to tell you this in case you've not heard it, in case you're unclear. It is okay to be at church and be sad, to be in a bad mood, to be doubting, to be in a dark place or depressed. In fact, this is the place I'd hope that would be okay to be when you're like that. And you might not feel like being here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to put pressure on you. You know, hopefully if you feel that way, it also happens to be Lent. Because we're going to read all the depressing verses. Every song is going to sound like a Russian funeral dirge. Right? We're going to make you regret showing up. Okay? And it's intentional. We're going to remind you of your sin and all the darkness and death in the world. And front row, you get to be a front row Christian tonight. Or you can get more chairs next door. It's up to you. But, all right. But every human experiences pain, suffering, and death. Here is my story. Oh, wait. This will probably not work. There's a camera right next to you. You can sit there. I'm just warning you. It's probably not going to... Oh, it didn't work. But I had a clip embedded in this video, which clearly didn't work. Because it didn't pop up. But it's from As Good As It Gets. Do you remember when they're about to go on the trip to get a big sweaty wad of cash from the guy's dad? That's the word Jack Nicholson uses. And he tells the story of why he and his father are not friends anymore to Helen Hunt. And then Jack Nicholson interrupts from the back and he says, "That's not it at all, really." And they say, "Oh, really? You tell us." And he says, "The problem is not that we've had it so bad. The problem is that everyone else has it so good. Their lives are boats, parks, white pants, and noodle salad, and the lake. And there are some people whose life." There's a seat for you, Gary. Do you want to come?
Yes.
Or right there next to the camera.
I've been saving it for you.
Man, I'm gonna have to set up more chairs. Sorry, this wall is gonna have to come out. But and noodle salad. And that's what bothers us. It's not that we've had it so bad, it's that everyone else has had it so good. You know, this is their life, the beach. And that's really how I thought for a long time. I really resonated with that quote. I really felt like I was the only one having all the bad stuff happen to him. So I want to tell you my story, and all of you have a story. I'm just telling you this because I'm the teacher, and I get to talk. And
Tell my story.
if you want to tell your story, go to seminary. No, I'm kidding. So, but before I get there, I like okay, I'm not there yet. All right. I think that American Christianity in general struggles to teach or engage with pain and suffering. I really think as a whole we have a problem with that. Why? Anyone want to shoot out a guess?
We don't know how to deal with it.
Okay, why?
I don't know.
It makes us uncomfortable
It
to
makes
see other
other
people in
people
pain.
It makes us uncomfortable. We have this notion in our society that other countries don't have as much as us. Western Europe does too, but not even as much as us. That we have a private life and a public life, right? And we don't like those two to mix. That's just American culture. So it's hard to be real public about things. What else? What's another reason? Why? The American.
Everybody does it, has different ways of dealing with it, and they don't want to, again, everybody goes through it differently. They don't want to discuss it, or they think it's too, people don't understand what they're
Right.
experiencing.
You're worried people won't understand, right? I feel like another way to say what you're trying to say, David, and tell me if I'm wrong, is we're not very good at community, are we?
No.
And we're getting a lot worse at it. I mean, my grandparents, I think, were pretty good at it. They had, they worked in a victory garden. My dad's parents, he was born in 1928. They had a victory garden for World War II, during World War II rationing, They were pretty good at community because they had to be. They really needed each other. So we're not that great at it. What else?
I think that we are a culture of easy answers, quick advice, and people don't need that. And they don't speak what's really on their mind because of all those platitudes and things that will just hit them from other people.
Okay, Rusty said we're a culture of easy answers and quick advice. I think that's right.
Sometimes we don't know what to say or do
Yeah,
that would be appropriate for that person in pain and suffering.
We
And
don't-
we might say something that makes it worse. It's hard to know
we don't know.
how to help.
Right. We don't know what to say or do.
Because we
Right?
don't know exactly what they're going through and how they're able to handle it sometimes.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of Job
Right.
and his friends when they kept coming to him with,
And his friends said all the
it's
wrong.
your fault.
They said all the wrong
It's all your
stuff.
fault.
Yeah.
If you would do this and this, yeah.
What else?
A lot of people have problems discerning between sympathy and empathy.
Okay.
That's
Can't
good.
tell the difference between sympathy and empathy. What about the prevalence of the health and wealth gospel? It's just like where if you've done something, if you're sick, it must be because of sin, right? And if you are struggling financially, you must not have enough faith, right? That's all in the water everywhere, especially in our culture. So we struggle to talk about this, and oh man, I should have clicked this next slide, then we wouldn't have had to guess, right? So why do we struggle? I think we have a low tolerance for uncertainty. And especially when you came out of the church world I came out of, it's not okay to not have the answer. It's just not. That shows a lack of faith. But when you're going through pain and suffering, you just have to learn to live with no answers for a while. It's about uncertainty. Uncertainty about everything. Everything. God, faith, future, relationships. And we have a low tolerance for that. What else? We like to turn God into a quid pro quo God. What does that mean?
You do something for me, I'll do something for you.
Right. I thought that's how this worked, God. And I've been doing those things for you. Here's the list of the things I've done. Why aren't you scratching my back now? Right? And if this isn't working, then whose fault is it? Yeah, it can't be mine, right? This can't be my fault. Yeah, that's how, anyway. I think, and I already talked about this for a minute, that especially in the American church, we've lost the ability to lament. I mean, we have a whole book of the Bible called Lamentations. Half of these Psalms are just really depressing. And since we're good Anglicans, if you're saying them in morning prayer, you're going to end with some of the most depressing things, and then you say, and glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, right? And if it's evensong, you're going to sing it. So, which I'm all 100% in favor of. But we just got to get good at the minor keys of that when we're going through this sad parts.
Tom, one of the funerals I went to years ago from what I would call a fundamentalist church up north I-35.
Mm-hmm.
A co-worker had been killed in a plane crash and killed 2 other people with him. And one of my other co-workers at the funeral was smiling and, isn't it wonderful that he's in heaven with Jesus? And that, talk about lost lament. They couldn't even cry over their co-worker.
Right.
It had to be a happy day.
But if you do that, I mean, where I came from, it feels like you're sinning if you do that. So I understand it. But yeah, I've experienced that as myself. Thank you, Nancy. So this is just me, but it would seem like we have an event built into our face that would give us a natural place to start conversation about the presence of pain and suffering in human life. Does anyone want to guess what that event is? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. It's just a guess, a random guess. Yeah, based on the slide.
Not based on the picture or anything.
Yeah. I looked for the glorious picture of the crucifixion I could find for this slide. I think the Roman Catholics in the United States are better at talking about pain and suffering than we are. I'm not saying it's healthy. I don't know, because I've never been Roman Catholic. You'll have to tell me. But I just think they're better at talking about it than we are. And I mean, we do better than where I came from, but we all have work to do on it. But we come here and pray to a God on Sunday who actually said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Those are his last words. Those don't sound like faith-filled words, do they? They sound like lament. They sound honest. They sound painful. We shouldn't be struggling with this so much. And this is, kind of the origin of our faith. At least we talked about this last week. If you weren't here, go on the Emmanuel Episcopal Church YouTube channel and watch the video about the Christian hope. But we should be better at talking about this. So I hope I didn't delete the slide that says my story. I feel like I'm really going out of order here, so it doesn't matter, I guess. But so early Christians, I think, expected to suffer. In fact, it says that all through the New Testament, all through the Christian scriptures, especially in the Gospels. And they for sure expected to suffer persecution. At least we know that. But, I mean, in the ancient world, you had 10 kids so that 4 could survive. Right? And in America, we kind of expect that we should live all to be 100, maybe 105. And that, we should be winning weightlifting contests by our 90th birthday, maybe swimming a triathlon. And that all of our kids go to Harvard and, and are professional athletes or, those are all the things we expect. Is it possible, repeat after me, is it possible, in our culture, we might have some unrealistic expectations? I think it's possible. I think it's possible. Okay, early Christians expected suffering. They did not see pain and suffering as theological problems to be solved. That's how I grew up thinking about pain and suffering. This is just a problem. And if I can, and I should be able to figure out the answer for it. And I just have the wrong scripture memorized. Or I'm doing something wrong. Because if God knew I had it figured out, God would watch my back. Does that make sense? Also, I think the early Christians understood, and most of the people, especially in the third world, understood that suffering is natural because we are mortal, and evil is part of our world. That's kind of in the very first story we have, right? We call it the fall. And we need to have realistic expectations about life. Oh, yes. Finally, I get to talk about myself. So here's my story, just real quickly. My dad was in his 50s when I was born. And I didn't know this until I was older, but he had Parkinson's disease my whole life. Until he passed away. He worked until he was 76 with Parkinson's disease. And worked in a manual labor job, repairing golf clubs at the golf course. He was a club maker and had been an assistant pro and all those things. He was an awesome dad. He wore a tie every day to work with a tie clip, slacks, hair parted perfectly, rimless glasses. He would have worn a suit coat if they would have, He wore wingtip shoes and he listened to big band music and on his record player. And cool guy. My dad and C.L. Craig's dad are only like 5 years age difference. But it was just a different generation. But he was my hero. And I was so excited and I've told you all this story, some of you, because I was engaged to be married. And it's the week of the wedding, and I came home and my dad had fallen in the driveway. And we were kicking off the week before the wedding. And Alexis and I found the food on the table and no family. So I called the ER at St. Francis and they said, yes, he's here, you need to come down. I went down, they told me he had an aneurysm. Turned out it was a fall though, not an aneurysm. He had blood on his brain, he wouldn't make it through the night. So this is 4 days before my wedding. So I called my brothers because the doctor told us he wouldn't make it through the night. He was gonna die. He did make it through the night, which at the time I attributed to God, and maybe it was. I still would like to think that, but he suffered he did not have a pleasant life for the next 6 months, and then he died. And so around that same time, I got this big nasty leg infection in my leg. I came back from my honeymoon, my feet hurt, and my dad was in the hospital still. But I went on a run the first morning back because I was a slim, trim 172 pounds, okay? And because I had gotten ready for the wedding. And when I sat down on the table, my right leg swelled up. Like I had pitting edema. Do you guys know what that is? Where you push in and the pit stays? It stays. So I went to the doctor. He said, well, some people just retain water. I'm going to give you a round of steroids. No blood tests. No, nothing. So I took the steroids. Week later, went on another run. Legs swelled up again. Went back to the doctor. Another round of steroids. Got better. Waited a few weeks longer. Went on another run. Legs swelled up. Got another round of steroids.
Oh, my God.
Lord.
Did it again. 4th round of steroids. It's been 2 or 3 months, and guess how much I weigh at this point? 220 pounds.
Oh, my God.
Steroids.
And then my left leg starts to swell up. So then I decided to get another doctor.
Yeah.
And this doctor had put me on an antibiotic for a sinus infection. So my doctor said, I can't do a blood test till this is out of your system. So finish the round of antibiotics, and then we'll do a blood test once it's out of your system. So I never got to finish it because anyway, all this took, 6 months to 8 months. I'm using crutches to get around. Both my legs are permanently swelled up. They're starting to get red all the time. And I decided at that point, I was doing my master's degree, that would be a good time to take Job, which in Oklahoma Christian Graduate School of Religion, I took wisdom literature and decided to learn about suffering. And I really struggled with that verse in Job that said, and all of these things, at the end of Job, it said, and all of these things, Job did not say anything evil about the bad things that God had brought upon him. And I was a biblical literalist, right? And I'd always thought evil came from the devil, but there I had right in the Bible. And then I realized how kind of elementary I had looked at evil, how immature my faith had been. And I didn't get a chance to think about it much because the next Sunday morning I woke up with a 104-degree fever. And I called my elder, the youth elder, because I was a youth minister at the church, and I said, I don't know if I can lead singing this morning or teach. They said, we have no one to fill in for you. So I went and taught class, and it was, I don't know what I said. I was sweating, and then I got up to lead singing, and halfway through I just said to the elder, you're going to have to finish because I can't even stand up. And so he finished, and afterwards my wife drove me to Ponca City Hospital, and they said, you need to take him right now to the ER in Enid. Went to Enid. They said if I had waited another day or two, I would have lost my right leg. I ended up spending 5 days in the hospital and it was a huge abscess caused by a bacterial infection. Probably when I went to Europe in college, I had, there's a picture of me, we're in by that castle in Germany, the Disney World.
Neuschwanstein.
Yes, Neuschwanstein. And our tour guide said, this water is clear enough to drink out of. So I bent over and drank this big old gulp because I was really thirsty. And then we came around the corner and saw this big old herd of cattle. And he said, oh, well. And anyway, the infection was called nocardia. They said it was a 4-year, it takes 4 years to grow in your system because it's a real slow growing bacteria. It took 6 months for it to grow in a petri dish for them to give me the right. Anyway, long story short, then I had a son. Eventually, we had our son, and he's got a genetic condition, and he's not doing well. This is how I cap off the story. They tell us he could die. He might need a bone marrow transplant. This could easily progress to leukemia. And so those 3 things together were just too much for me. And that's where my faith started to fall apart. I'm trying to make this short and sweet. So here are some of the things that were said to me during that time. Both of those times about my dad. Well, it was just his time. Maybe. But you don't know that, right? I mean, I don't know. Was it? What does that mean? somebody actually said this, God needed another angel in heaven, so he took your dad. Which is so funny to me now, because when I went to seminary, they gave you a list of things not to say.
That was
And it was on the list. And it was so funny because I fell and hurt my leg in seminary and had to have a tendon like sewed together. Not a big deal after everything else. And my pastoral theology professor came to see me, and I'm laying in the bed, she's looking at me, and I'm thinking, here's my chance. And I said, I really think that an angel in heaven just needed some knee skin. And so God took mine. And when you're the one laying in the bed, you can say whatever you want, right? And she did not like that. It was hilarious. About my son, I heard I just needed to pray harder. And then when I went to the elders of our congregation, and I told them, my son might need a bone marrow transplant, and we need to go to Cincinnati, Toronto, or Boston to do this because they're the only places that have any experience with kids with SDS. They only have a 50% success rate in a standard children's hospital. So if this happens, I'll be bankrupt. I have to have health insurance. And they said, well, you should have negotiated for that on the front end.
Before you died.
That sounded kind of heartless.
Yes, it did.
It is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Should have offered it.
Yeah.
They should have been
Yeah.
chasing you down with it.
Yes. That's what I guess they didn't want me to stay there because I didn't. But all of you have stories like this. Mine is not special. Many of you have much worse stories. I've heard them. You know why? Because all humans experience pain, suffering, and death. Every single one of us. Remember that first point we made? But it's just the way life is. In case you're watching online, that's Nancy's phone that's going off. I'm just kidding, Nancy. I mean, it really was her phone, but sorry, I shouldn't have pointed it out, Nate.
It's okay.
Sorry.
No, I'm not. So, here's another thing that was said to me. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. I don't think that that's true. That's a verse in the Bible, and you might be thinking, man, Tom, you are a heretic. Well, we're going to talk about that. But I think with faith, anyone can come through anything and grow from it and learn from it. I think that's true. I think Franklin Roosevelt was not the same person he would have been had he not had polio. Martin Luther King is not the same person he would have been if he had grown up in the Jim Crow South. Or Abraham Lincoln, if he hadn't lost all those elections, would not have been who he was. That's not what I'm saying, okay? You can grow through pain and suffering. But this is probably the most misused verse in Scripture. I would not go to a Jewish person and talk about the Holocaust and say, all things work together for good. And this is something that was said to me, and this really, the other things that were said to me made me question that person, right? But when this one was said to me, who do you think I questioned? God. Lots of angry prayers or tearful prayers. God, show me how this could work for my good. Right? Well,
I've always thought about you have two people, two children,
Mhm.
I mean, two separate families, two children, maybe the same illness or some car crash or whatever, and one child dies, the other one doesn't. And the one, why?
Why?
The child died instead of,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's always,
And how do you say that's for good?
yeah.
Right. Well, what if I told you that you could translate this verse completely differently than how it's translated if you look at the Greek?
We want to know how.
Okay, okay. All right. God works all things together for good with those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And the context is not talking about going to visit a friend in the hospital who's going through some bad stuff. It's not talking about a needle point. It's not supposed to be a needle point you can put on a pillow and sell and put on a t-shirt to make people feel better, right? There might be some verses that work that way. This one isn't one, okay? Because when you read this in the context of Romans 8, what is this saying? When bad stuff happens, guess what? In the world, when bad stuff happens in the world, what's my job? To do something to
Make it better.
make it better.
Right, that empowers us.
Yes, and that God will work with me to make that happen. That's kind of the point.
Calling it to
It's calling me to do something. And it's in the context of a bunch of passages in Romans 8. So can you see that from back there, John? You're the official reader of the class.
No, I don't have my glasses.
Okay, and Nancy, can you see that from
Yes,
there?
I can see it, it's
Can-
great.
Yeah. Can you read it? Do you regret
Yes,
saying
I
that?
read it.
Yeah.
I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience.
Keep going.
Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. And God, who searches the heart, knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God.
So this is a verse right before the t-shirt verse. Okay? So what is Paul trying to say here? And then you go right into, and God works all things together for good with those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So what is Paul saying here? I'm just going to take a stab at it, okay? I'm not an expert. Oh, man. Well, I'll just tell you what Paul was saying. Oh, here we go. There we go. So the with refers back to the previous verse. So what's the previous verse? Those people who were kind of caught up in this dialogue between the Father and the Spirit. He says the Father or the Spirit intercedes for the saints. And then what does it say? With what?
Sighs too deep for words.
Sighs too deep for words. So when things are so bad, all you can do is groan. That's what it's saying. Like, when there are no words for this bad moment, just groaning, and that's the Spirit groaning for you. In those moments, and it goes all the way back to Romans 5:5 is where this thought starts. But he's saying, basically, we're caught up in this totally bizarre dialogue between the Father and the Spirit, which is odd, and we're kind of in that cross-shaped center that's in the middle of it. And then the very next verse it says, so that we might be conformed to the image of his Son. Let's remember that picture we saw earlier? That cross-shaped picture. So what else is Paul saying? He's asking us what happened when we let that agonized prayer happen. We said it's groanings. I kind of skipped ahead. God works with us because the Spirit is at work in us. You know why some of the reasons we pick translations is because we want to present consistent doctrine. If you're an English translator, and if you don't think that works have anything to do with your salvation, and you're translating, you're not going to put that our Spirit works God or with God, because it's 100% God's job, right? But if we're just letting the text speak for itself, we might translate it differently. Did you know that sometimes the doctrine we take to the translation can affect the way we translate it? So, he's also saying that God doesn't know what to say. The Spirit's just groaning. So why are all these other people trying to figure out what to say? Do you ever think about that? Like God, the Spirit in you, knows how bad it is and just groans. That's the only prayer that God is capable of, groaning. Ugh. And yet, for some reason, we have the need to say, all things work together for good. Right? God's not even saying that. God's groaning. So, here's my big conclusion. Okay, after losing my faith for a while. I think that what we need is not an answer to the question of why God allows pain and suffering. You know why? Because you're not going to ever get that answer. It's just not going to happen. But I do think we need the ability to live with unanswered questions and still retain faith and hope in the goodness of God. Because I really think that's the best we can hope for. That's what faith is. And it's not because we even are happy about it all the time. It's not because that makes sense. It's not because I want Tom to think I'm a good Christian. It's just because it is not rational to live life with no hope and no meaning. I mean, it's not. I tried to do it for a while. It doesn't work. And I don't know why God allows pain and suffering. The best answer I have is that God gives us free will, and so people are free to do stupid stuff. And that includes hurting each other and just making mistakes. And the other answer is there's chaos in the world. Jesus said over and over, do you think that tower in Siloam fell on those people because they were worse sinners? And he says, no. That's not how it works. Sometimes bad things just happen. Do we like it? Do we yell at God? Yes. Do we lament? Yes. Are we sad? Yes. Is all of that okay?
Yes.
Yes. It has to be. Because remember that crucifix we were looking at earlier? So, to me, that's not a good answer. That's not a fun answer. But it is hopeful to think that there is a God who loves us. Right? And when we suffer, God is more sad about it than we are. That's all I have. Okay? So, just like the psalm, I'll end on a possibly sad note. But thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.